Once your foundation nears completion, it'll look something like this. And this plan is really effective to tell the contractor where all the footings are, what the walls are, where they go, even their size. But what it doesn't do is let us see this in a way that we can understand how tall are these walls, how tall are these footings, what is the rebar inside of these foundation walls. For that, we would need almost like a 3D view, similar to this, only we're not going to provide a 3D view. We're going to provide what we call a section where we cut through a wall, just like I'm doing right here, and that's all we're going to show, just the cut. We won't show the length of it. We won't show how it extends. We'll just show the most typical condition that we have throughout this entire foundation. Okay, and by typical condition, what I mean is there a wall in here that represents what we're doing throughout most of the house? And for me, I could cut that anywhere along here, anywhere along the back, anywhere along the side. I don't want to do the garage. That's not that typical. It only pertains to the garage. It doesn't pertain to the rest of the house. I also don't want to do the porch. It's also not typical. So we're going to find the most typical condition, which for me is going to be probably right back here. There's a handful of other places that would be just as good. Okay, to start off with, let's go find our little section tool. And typically, you're going to have this come up as either a building section or a wall section in the type selector. We don't want either of those. Instead, we want to make this a detail. Okay, and wherever you click first, you're going to get a little bubble head. So I would move your cursor outside of the foundation and then click. That's the bubble head I'm talking about. Pull your cursor over to the left, and what we have here is a little section line that says we're going to cut through the wall right at that point. And then the tail here tells you what direction you're going to be looking. So I would turn this up so that if I am looking that direction, right will be on the right side, left will be on the left side. If you do it the other way, now as I'm looking this way, right will be over here, right? And left will be over here. So it's a little bit backwards for me in my brain. It's just easier if I turn this the direction that I would actually be looking. Okay, now that we have it set up, we probably ought to rename this. It's going to be somewhere over here in our project browser. And if you want to know what this new section detail is called, just double click on the bubble. Okay, it opened up. Mine is called Detail 1. Yours is probably Detail 0. Either way, let's expand this box just a little bit so we can see the entirety. You might have to go more to the right, more to the left, but I want to see the entirety of this concrete wall and footing. Okay, now back to what I was talking about with the name. It's called Detail 1. Let's come over here to our project browser, and if you just type in the number, in my case 1, yours is probably 0, type that in, then you're going to see everything that has the 1 or the 0 in its name, and so it makes Detail 1 really easy to find. I'm going to right click here and rename, and like I said before, this is our typical foundation, which means we want to name this typical foundation. So I'm going to right click, select rename, type in typical foundation, and I'm not going to worry about making that all caps. These lowercase letters are fine. Okay, then I'm going to hit enter, and now this is our typical foundation. Okay, when I come back over here to the view, one thing that you'll notice right away is that the text is really big. The concrete doesn't look like it's filled in with that gray hatch. And we set that up through the material for concrete, so it really ought to be showing up gray here. I've got some things up above that I don't need, and there's a box around this. Those are all things that I mean to fix. To do so, let's start off with the text size. The only reason it shows up this way is because the scale over here is 1/4 inch, which is actually the same scale as my foundation. So details are meant to enlarge things and show them bigger, and then we understand them a little bit better at their larger size. So if the floor or foundation plan is at 1/4 inch, that's not a very big size. We wouldn't want to make our detail at the same size or the same scale. So let's increase this. I'm going to go all the way up until I find 1 inch equals a foot. Okay, and that made a pretty big difference to the text. Now, that doesn't mean this is the right scale. The only way to know if this is the right scale is to actually drag this detail onto a sheet and find out if we have room for it. We will, in this case, in most cases, we will have enough room for a 1 inch equals a foot. But in a minute, I'll show you how to know for sure. Okay, the next thing is that I can see, like I said, I can see that there's no solid fill here, and for some reason there is down here. And that's because this one is a wall, this one is a structural foundation, so for whatever reason they're displaying differently. If we want them to display the same way, come down here to your display options and let's make the level of detail fine, and voila. Now they both look like they're concrete. That's what we want. Okay, the next thing, let's hide some stuff up here. It looks like I have a floor in the way, looks like I have some joists. Select whatever you have and just EH for element hide. Now those are gone. Okay, and then I've got this box in here. This is a crop region. That's all it is. So down here it can be controlled. It can either crop or not crop, and you can see when I turn off the cropping ability, there are lots of other things that show up in this view. In fact, the whole house will show up. Anything that's structural, or some things that aren't, are going to show up. So that's probably not what we want. Let's turn that back on. We want it to crop, but we don't necessarily want to see the crop region. So that's what this button will do. I can hide the crop region, and that looks a lot more clean. Now you may or may not have a level that says top of grade or even just grade. This doesn't need to be here. It's fine if it is there, but if you don't have one, don't worry about it. I'm just going to hide mine, so mine probably looks more like yours now. Okay, the three levels that matter: the foundation, the top, and the bottom of our footing. If for any reason yours doesn't look this way, you probably just need to select your wall and make sure that its constraints are set up properly. In my case, I want that wall to go down to the footing, and at the top, I want it to go up to the foundation. Now be careful. Before you make a change, you're only adjusting one wall. So it would be better if you typed in SA, and now it says I have 14 walls selected, and that'd be 14 concrete walls that are all the same, and I'm going to change those all together. So again, make sure that the base is top of footing and the top constraint is foundation, and we don't want any offsets. Okay. If there is going to be any change to the height, it'll just be at the porch, and we do that by attaching the top of the wall to the porch slab, so we don't need to really adjust any of these offsets. Okay, so with this in mind, what are we missing? Well, a good detail needs to show us what are the heights, so we should put in some dimensions. It needs to show us, what's inside of this wall besides the concrete. And since we do have a lot of rebar going into our foundation, this would be the place to show it. This is where a contractor would go to look and see, what do I need to be responsible for inside of that concrete? He would check out the detail. So this is where we're going to provide it. And then the last thing is that we would just put a few annotations in here, a few text items to be able to label and call out exactly what it is that we're showing. Okay, so let's get started with, let's do the rebar. To do the rebar, you're going to need to add some families into Revit. So you'll need to go to Insert, Load Autodesk Family. Make sure you log in. And then once you get logged in, let me go back to the beginning here. Once you get logged in, come up here and do a search and just type in the word bar. Then hit enter. Okay, and the particular bar that we're looking for is going to look like this. Reinforced bar bend 3 through 8. I'll go ahead and select that. Okay, and the next one we want to select is this reinforced bar section. Now this is what rebar looks like if you cut through it, because it's circular in shape. If you were to cut through it on the end, you would just see a circle. And that's what the reinforced bar section is for. In some places in our concrete, we're going to show that we're just simply cutting through a piece of rebar, and we'll put a little circle inside the concrete to show where we've cut through it. Okay, with those two things, we need to go to our components and find them so that we can place them here in the concrete. And the way to find them would be to go to Annotate, Component, hit the drop down, and we want a detail component. Now take note here. This is different from the other component tool, Place a Component. These are all 3D objects. If you look through the list, you're going to find 3D objects. When you want something that's just two-dimensional, you go Component, Detail Component, and sure enough, there's my rebar section. The size that we want is number 4. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I'll place one kind of near the top, but not in the center. I'm going to push this over to the left a little bit, and then directly below that at the very bottom, I'm going to do another one, and then somewhere in the middle, I'm going to do one more. Okay, now think about what that represents. In fact, let me show you a picture. If we take a picture like this, for example, you can see that there's rebar running through the concrete. And in some places, it's showing the end of the rebar. And that's all that we're looking at. Whenever we see a circle, it would be more like this instance over here, where if you looked at this face of the wall straight on, you'd see a rectangular outline for the wall, and you'd see little circles everywhere that there was a piece of rebar. And that's all that we're showing here. We've got horizontal rebar, so this runs the entire length of the concrete. Okay, it would run all the way through here at the top, the middle, and the bottom. Now let's talk just briefly also about the fact that we chose the number 4. Rebar is sized according to the number that it's called out. So if I go with a bigger one like 8, you can see the diameter gets bigger. Number 4 is what you're going to see in residential construction most often. And what it means is we take the number 4 and we multiply that by 1/8 of an inch, and whatever we come up with, that's the overall diameter of this circle. So number 4 means that's a 1/2 inch diameter, 1/2 inch all the way across. And number 8 then would be a full inch. Okay, so we've got our horizontal rebar. Now we want to do our vertical rebar, the stuff that's going to run up and down inside this wall. And to do that, we're going to go right back to the same tool, annotate component. If you don't have that, remember, go annotate, hit the drop down, find detail component. And then if you don't have the one that we need, you can just type in bar right here in the search. All I had to do was scroll up though, and here it is, reinforced bar bend sizes 3 through 8. Once again, we want the number 4. And when you pull this one in, we want to put it down here inside the footing, even though it's a little bit too big. We'll adjust that in a minute. So I'm going to put it in the footing somewhere towards the center of the footing, maybe a little bit lower, and it should go right up the center of the wall. And that's why we put these horizontal pieces a little bit staggered. They're just a little bit over to the left to leave room for this vertical piece. Okay, this vertical piece, when we click on it, has 2 lengths, 1 and 2, L1 and L2, and they both happen to be the same here. So what happens if I change this one to 3 feet? Enter. Okay, that's the one that we want. We're trying to make this whole thing taller. So L2 seems to do that for me. So I'm going to click on it again, and I'm going to go with 4 foot. Let's try like 3 inches. Okay, not bad. Let me try a different number. Right about there. You always have to leave a little bit of cover over the top of your rebar. If it were to poke through, it can cause problems. So we want it to be completely encapsulated. We leave a gap at the top. And then down here at the bottom, we can change the other L1, so that it's not so long. And same thing here, we just want it to come out towards the end without penetrating the edge of the concrete. And I don't know what that's going to be. Let's try it at 9 inches, 0 space 9, too big. Let's try it at maybe 7 inches. That looks good. Okay, and then what's happening here is that this rebar goes down through this concrete wall, and in the bottom, it's connecting the concrete wall to its footing with this hook. So once again, let me find a picture. Okay, I've got a couple of great pictures to show you here. So here's the rebar. It's got the hook on it, and you can see that these forms here are just for the footing, not the concrete wall. So they're going to put the concrete down inside here. It's going to form around that hook, and then it's never coming out. I mean, if it goes down and then bends inside this concrete, that thing is stable, and it's going to last there forever. A couple other things to notice is that the rebar is sitting on another piece of rebar, and this runs along the length of the footing, which helps to stabilize that footing and make sure that it doesn't crack somewhere in the middle. And then the other thing to notice is that a rebar comes down and it bends one direction, and then the next piece comes down and alternates, so it's bending in the opposite direction. Okay, here's another really good example. Here's where the footing's going to be. You can see the alternating direction and the bottom piece. Okay, and then the last thing is that here's some rebar sticking up and out of the footing. So it looks like this footing was poured pretty recently when this picture was taken. It still looks a little bit wet. Once that cures, you'll just be left with a whole bunch of dowels. We call these dowels when they're sticking up out of the concrete. And those are there so that when we come and place the wall, those two are really well interlocked. The wall and the footing are never going to shift independently from each other. Okay, so back to what we're doing. This is my hook. This is my rebar up through the wall. I've got some horizontals and I need 2 more. So I'm going to grab this, CS for create similar, and I'm going to put this underneath one side, and then I'll go to the other and I'll put it over there. And then the last thing we would need here is that alternating hook. So to do this, all I'm going to do is MI for mirror after selecting the rebar. Looks like it didn't work. Sorry, it's not MI, it's MM. MM. And then it wants you to pick the point where you want it to flip around or mirror around. So you can see there's kind of a dashed line right there in the middle. I'll choose the middle and it will mirror about that spot or about that line. And I'm not going to leave it like this. This is a little bit confusing. It looks like one piece of rebar that splits. Instead, I'm going to use DL for detail line. I'll use pick lines. And I'm going to change this so that it's the hidden line style, which is a dashed line. Okay, now if I go and I just pick carefully on the radius, and then the shank here and here, and then select that black rebar and just delete that out. Okay, and then I've got a little bit of trimming to do. And what this now implies is that there's a rebar here, and when it alternates, it's going to go that way. Okay, so we're not quite done with our detail yet. The next video is going to show you how to finish it out. But before we do that, I mentioned that I would show how to put this onto a sheet to make sure that the size is just right. That's how we'll finish out this video, and then the annotations and adding in earth hatches and gravel for the crawl space, that'll all happen in the next video. Okay, so to make sure this will fit properly on a sheet, first of all, go to your project browser and look for your sheets. This is the icon you want to click on. I'm going to clear out that one in my search. And you should have a sheet called S0 Foundation Plan. Okay, go ahead and open that. I've got some details here that should just be ignored. This is currently the space that I have. Okay, I've got a foundation plan, and I've got some space over here on the right where I can put some details, or vice versa. I can put this over here and put my details over to the left. But what I'm trying to accomplish is getting as much as I can on this one sheet as possible. So depending on the size of your house, you may or may not be able to do that. The other thing to keep in mind is that there are no dimensions on this foundation plan yet, and dimensions are critical here. We have to place dimensions. So that's going to take up a little space over here on the left and on the right, and this is the space I think I'll be left with. Now let's go click on Views. Let's find our typical. Should just be able to type in the word typical, and here it is, typical foundation. And then I'll drag that over. And you can see I've got a lot of space. I'm going to pull it over to the left, and I need one more detail down here to finish out this assignment. Sometimes you need even 3 or 4 or 5 concrete details. But for this assignment, we're only doing 2. So I feel like at 1 inch equals a foot, I would have enough space. If I needed to make this smaller, I would simply go choose maybe 3/4. You can see it got smaller. Okay, let's keep this at 1 inch. And let's keep in mind that as long as I click inside of this viewport, I can make changes right here. And one thing I might do is just pull this over, because I really don't need that level to extend out quite so far. And then the next thing I'm going to do is select the label for a typical foundation, and I'm going to pull that over towards the right. Then I'm going to click on the viewport so that the grip will show up here, and I'm going to pull that back towards the left. Okay, and I'm just trying to get this to kind of sit directly below the typical foundation, below its detail. Okay, and what you're going to notice when we do that, a cool thing just happened. Over here, my detail just got populated. The bubble got populated. It now says, if you want to see what it looks like when we cut through here, go look at sheet S0, that's structural 0 sheet, and go look at detail number 2. And this is sheet S0 already, and this is detail number 2, and that's how those two remain connected.